Welcome back to Stab the Dragon. This is Thursday, March 31st, 2022. And we're here with a special edition. Look what we've got going on today. We're going to be doing a review of Blanton's Gold. And the big picture was we were doing reviews of North Texas whiskeys, Fort Worth whiskeys. The last several weeks I've found one excuse after another to not go back to those. We've done a wide variety of whiskeys in the last 6 weeks or 2 months or so. And today we've got Blanton's Gold. So a friend of mine who travels around the world for his job showed up at my house a while back with this as a gift and wants me to do a review of it. So we opened it that night. We had some, opened the grill and we grilled some meat and had Blanton's, and it was amazing. So friend didn't want to be named, but thank you to him, and just an amazing surprise. So let's get into this because the history is a little bit long here. Tracing the history of this bourbon and the distillery which produced it, the Buffalo Trace Distillery, we're going to be looking at the pages of America's bourbon's who's who. There's so many great names involved here. The name Buffalo Trace for the distillery, and of course the bourbon that they're famous for, it refers to a well-worn passage of actual buffalo through the area they cross the Kentucky River in Franklin County, Kentucky. Daniel Boone passed through that way in 1771. And in those days, Kentucky really was the wild, wild west. Hancock and Willis Lee established a homestead in the area and allegedly began a still. Then in 1812, Harrison Blanton built a distillery on site, and Buffalo Trace claims that this makes them the oldest distilling distillery in America. Okay, but Burke's Distillery of Maker's Mark fame, they object. They say that theirs is older. So there's a little bit of give and take going on there. But in 1858, Daniel Swigert builds a more up-to-date distillery on the location beside the river, and then sells it in 1870 to Colonel E.H. Taylor, Jr. He purchased the distillery and he renames it to the OFC Distillery, which stands for Old-Fashioned Copper Still Distillery. So they were looking for old-fashioned stuff even back in the 1870s. In 1878, E.H. Taylor sells the distillery to George T. Stagg. In 1882, the distillery is burned by a lightning strike, but they immediately rebuild it, bigger and better. The OFC distillery continues to expand over the years. And then in 1897, Albert B. Blanton joins the distillery at the age of 16 as an office boy. But by 1900, at the age of 19, Blanton is appointed superintendent of distilling and warehouse bottling. And in 1904, the OFC distillery is renamed in honor of George T. Stagg. Prohibition, of course, starts with the 18th Amendment in 1920, but the Stagg Distillery is one of the few that was left in operation for medicinal purposes. And in 1921, Blanton becomes president of the Stagg Distillery. In 1929, the Shenley Distillers Corporation purchases the Stagg Distillery, and by 1933, Prohibition has ended. At that time, Stagg Distillery is one of only 4 remaining in Kentucky that is able to immediately start distilling whiskey. Blanton then supervises a massive expansion of the distillery in the early 30s to mid-30s to 1937. Then a record-breaking flood brings massive destruction to the area in 1937. The floodwaters crested 17 feet above the top of the power plant, 4 feet above the top of the famous Metal Warehouse H. Blanton's first metal warehouse was constructed out of metal because during the expansion phase, it would be quicker to build than one out of wood. Well, after the flood, they cleaned up and were able to start distilling in just a day afterwards, okay, just after a day of cleaning up. And that's after the floodwaters went down. Blanton discovered something about Warehouse H along the way, that those metal walls transmit temperature more efficiently than wood walls, and that was affecting the aging process of the whiskey in that warehouse. He found that some of the finest bourbon he had came from Warehouse H, and he began picking single barrels and bottling them as his special reserve for when guests, special guests, friends, family, etc. came by. Well, he was on to something, but it would be up to his protege and successor to fully develop the idea. So we enter Elmer T. Lee. In World War II, Elmer T. Lee was a bombardier on board B-29s in the Pacific Theater. There you go. He was a flight crew member during the war. And after the war, he got hired on by the distillery in 1949. Well, by 1984, he was ready to retire. He had become the master distiller and had great success there. He was set to retire, but was given one final task: create an exceptionally high quality premier bourbon. Now, during this time, Lee remembered what Blanton used to do with Warehouse H. So that's where Lee went to start the first single barrel bourbon for marketing to the public. This would revolutionize the whiskey industry, because today most distilleries offer at least one single barrel premium bourbon, and prior to 1984, none did. So Blanton's was the first. Now, the distillery changed hands again. 1992, Sazerac purchased the distillery. But the bourbon itself, the distillery offers 4 different Blanton's bourbons. You've got the original single barrel at 93 proof. You've got the gold edition that I've got here at 103 proof. You've got straight from the barrel at cask strength, and that proof varies. And then you've got the special reserve at 40 proof, and that's only for the international market. There are 8 special stoppers on these bottles, and each stopper has a horse and a jockey. And so I'm showing you this one right here, and you probably cannot see it, but right here at the bottom of the hoof is an S, and that means this is the because each of the 8 stoppers has a letter of the name Blanton's in it, and this is the final letter. And so you see he's doing his victory lap, sort of. He's no longer racing, he's raising his hand up in victory. And those things are rightfully collector's items, serious collector's items. Well, let's talk about the whiskey history itself. A lot of evidence points to the idea that Blanton's is more scarce in America than it should be. It's very popular and easily available in Japan, which is where my bottle came from. Well, how is this possible? Well, according to some articles I've read, and according to Fred Minnick's book here, Bourbon, the Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of an American Whiskey, Minnick writes, Blanton's was created for the Japanese market and entered the U.S. market for $24, targeting baby boomer pockets. When it launched in September of '84, Blanton's was advertised in the New Yorker, the Wall Street Journal, and Ivy League alumni newspapers. And there's some history here that really it wasn't popular. It was not received well in America. And so it just continued to be marketed heavily in Japan. And so that's why Blanton's is really kind of scarce here, is that the Japanese really took to it, and so it's more readily available there. And in the big picture, what was going on was in the 60s and 70s, whiskey in America kind of took a back seat to gin and vodka. And so at the same time in Japan, American bourbons were taken off. American whiskeys and bourbons were taken off. And so that's why the market kind of swung towards the Japanese. Well, let's add something else here. The Blanton's brand is produced at Buffalo Trace Distillery, but that doesn't mean Buffalo Trace owns the brand. In this case, Blanton's is owned by Takara Holdings, a Japanese company. So here's the real answer to why you have trouble finding Blanton's in the stores. It's a combination of history, drinking trends in different countries, as well as marketing, as well as who the current owners are. So all that goes into it, and you know, that's one of the reasons why it's rare. Now, premium, you know, you start dealing with premium whiskeys, premium bourbons. Obviously, there's going to be higher price, and higher price and higher quality means you know, you're not going to. It's easy to get Evan Williams or Jack Daniels, but you're just not going to have as many Blantons, and so there's a basic economics that's working there as well. So in my evaluation of the history of this whiskey, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 for history, because this is an American treasure. So let's talk about marketing and packaging. I do have the box for it right here. Blanton's, the original single barrel bourbon whiskey, gold edition. And it's got you know, a picture of the bottle there. But the box itself is a little bit on the plain ordinary side. You've got some Japanese there on the back. But the bottle with the cork stopper, with the jockey, you know, this is a 700 milliliter bottle, which again, most American whiskeys you're looking at 750, but because this is marketed overseas, I guess, it's bottled at 700. And it comes from, well, this is bottle number 186. It's smudged a bit, a little bit hard to read. It was dumped on 3/11/21. I don't think you're going to be able to read this. It's gold lettering embossed onto the glass. And so it does, you know, the gold edition doesn't have a regular sticker or paper wrapper. It's embossed on there. But it's from barrel number 105, warehouse H, Rick number 3. It's distilled by the Blanton Distilling Company, Frankfort, Kentucky. Now, I've long called this bottle style a hand grenade, because if you look at it, I mean, it's rather large, but it looks like a World War II pineapple grenade. I mean, it really does. That's just, you know, this veteran's take on it. But you know, the label that's stamped on there in gold is in cursive, and again, that's kind of classy. All the legal mumbo jumbo stuff is printed, but you know, it's really a very nice bottle, very classy bottle. I guess again, why it's a 700 milliliter bottle is I've heard that Caribbean bottles and Canadian bottles are 750, but Japanese are 700. So, you know, there's all that. Marketing, packaging, bottle, I'm going to say 5 out of 5, because the bottle is just simply gorgeous. I've never heard of a commercial for it, though. I've not seen that. I've seen lots of videos about it. And then the racehorse and jockey thing, that's a genius level marketing ploy there, because those are collector's items. So let's talk about the composition next. This whiskey is thought to be Buffalo Trace's mash bill number 2. Supposedly it's a high rye content, and again, the bottle number is listed, the barrel is listed, everything is listed there. I won't repeat that. Technically it's non-age stated, but they say 6 to 8 years. The term single barrel is not a legal term, so all the distilleries are kind of on an honor system with that. What it means is there's no blending of barrels going on. This is just one barrel. You know, now they'll water them down, and you're going to have different barrels for a barrel release, okay? But they're not going to blend those barrels at all. and then they'll blend it down to whatever proof and they want. So in other words, my bottle comes from barrel number 105. That may taste a bit different than barrel 104. Okay. So in scoring the composition, I'm a bit conflicted. I get it, the companies don't want to release their mash bill, and then something like this, maybe a non-age statement. You know, it's a premier single barrel bourbon, so there's going to be some generalities there. But the bottle and barrel are numbered, and the bottling date is given. So the information about who owns this brand did take some research. It's not readily available. So when it comes to composition, I'm only going to give it 10 out of 15 points. Now, physical appearance. Here we've got a nice, rich amber color. Boy, that's medium. You know, it's not exceptionally dark. You know, if you want dark, you go to Balcones, Texas whiskeys. But you know, so it's a good, nice looking color. You know, it's got good legs in the glass. So physical appearance, I'm going to say is 5 points. And aroma, nosing. You know, here I really do catch some aroma, and those of you who've watched my other videos know I have a terrible nose. So this is so rich. I am catching a little bit of fruit, some. I'm not getting. You know, some people say they're getting rye spice or tobacco in the nose. I'm getting the honey and the dark fruit, maybe some caramel, but yeah, I'm not getting anything else. But you know, I've got a lousy nose. So, but the fact that it's a bourbon and I can actually smell something, that's pretty amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and give that an 8 in points for the nose. Now, what about tasting? The all-important tasting. I will agree with some of the other reviewers. I do taste the rye. It's a high rye mash bill, and I love that. I love a high rye mash bill, and I can definitely taste that. I couldn't get the tobacco on the nose, but I can on the palate. And then honey, oak. I'm not getting the vanilla. You know, some people say they get vanilla. Definitely caramel, and definitely a dash of cinnamon. So this has just a classic rich bourbon flavor and taste. And I love, you know, again, that rye and tobacco flavor that comes through. So that is, I'm going to have to tell you that that's probably the finest bourbon that I've ever had. Okay, I mean, without a doubt, that is definitely a rich bourbon flavor going on there. Mouthfeel and finish. I mean, it's full-bodied. It's oily. Creamy. Smooth, but definitely spicy. And so I'm getting a little bit of a burn. I mean, again, it depends on what you do in your mouth. But it's smooth going down. I'm getting more of a mouth burn going up in the sinuses just a little bit. And some people don't like the burn. I love the burn. Okay, if I get just too smooth of a whiskey, to me that's a little bit of a downer. And so this has got a spicy burn to it, just a little bit of an alcohol burn going up in the sinuses. Really nothing coming down here, but the mouthfeel and finish is very strong, very good. You know, I've still got the cinnamon going on in my mouth there. Very, very definitely. So I'm going to have to say mouthfeel and finish is, uh, that's got to be a 13. So now let's talk about uh, value. Price, value, and availability. The MSRP for this gold edition of Blanton's single barrel is $120, depending on where you look. I've seen it MSRP suggested for $99.99. I've seen it for $120. I've seen it for about $135. So you know, figuring out, nailing down exactly what the MSRP is can be difficult. Now, if you're looking at secondary prices from the secondary market, black market, whatever you want to call it, there you're looking at 300 or better. Okay, 250, 300, 350. You know, so if you go to the secondary market, you're going to pay out the nose, right? Uh, but I've got no really experience, none at all, with high-end premier bourbons. You know, I kind of am at the $70 below market. But I checked online at Specs, Total Wine and Goody Goody here in Fort Worth, and not one of them had any Blantons. Although Goody said that the Dallas store might have some at times if they aren't sold out. But you know, Fort Worth is about 1 million in population, and no Blantons, really? I don't know. You know, again, I guess you gotta go to Japan. So availability is actually zero for me. I never would have been able to get this bottle if it's just me. But you've got a friend who travels the world over, and he can find it. So there you go. Blessings. So for price value, I mean, man, I mean value that's so subjective. I'm telling you, this is the best bourbon I've ever had, and so, but it's beyond my price range. This was a gift, so you know it's highly valued. I know that, and at the MSRP, I think you know up to 120, 130 bucks. I think it's probably worth it. You know, but availability zero for me. So I'm gonna only say 8 out of 10 because it is so rare. So now let's ask the question, is this neat or a mixer? If anybody was to mix this, you know, I couldn't stand it. This is a neat drink only. That's how it's supposed to be consumed. It's not a mixer at all. So 5 points as a neat drink. Bonus points, yeah, 5 points, the full bonus load, because this is the best bourbon I've ever tasted. The bottle and stopper are super cool. I recognize the superior quality here, and this bottle traveled around the world. It left Kentucky, it went to Japan, and has come back to Texas. So there you go. The history behind this bourbon is ultra cool, and even the marketing strategy and the history of it to the Japanese is fantastic, considering who was drinking what in the 1970s and early 80s. So let's go through here and get a total tally on the points. I've got 5, 10, 20, 25, 33, 57, 70, 78, 83, 88, 88 points on my scale, which is ridiculously low. Letter grade A+. You know, because the low point value comes from such things as price availability, you know, and then my nose that doesn't work. I only gave it 8 points for that. You know, so there's some nickel and dime stuff that kind of keeps my scores down at times. But that's why I also give a letter grade. And my letter grade is an A+ because this is the absolute best bourbon I've ever had. So my recommendations. If you are in a location where you can get it for MSRP, it's very well worth it. Absolutely. To me, this Premier Bourbon, Blanton's Gold Edition, is the best bourbon I've ever had. Now, I have almost zero experience drinking Premier bourbons, and so maybe somebody out there says, oh, some other thing is better. Well, I get that. Taste is very subjective, but I highly recommend it if you're in a possible position of acquiring it. Go for it. You won't regret it. Well, this is Stab the Dragon with the special edition of Blanton's Gold, and we're signing out for now, and we'll rejoin you later. Thank you very much.